What is going on, guys? Welcome back. In today's video, we're going to learn about Pinecone, which is a full stack Python web framework, which means front end and back end done in Python, no JavaScript and no HTML. So let us get right into it. Alright, so Pinecone is a web framework that allows us to build web applications front-end and back-end using only Python. So the UI elements are defined using Python, the styling is defined using Python, and the program logic, the functionality, is also implemented in Python. And when we go to the GitHub repository of Pinecone, we can see some information about its current status. As of December 2022, Pinecone has just been released publicly and is in the alpha stage, basically meaning there may be issues, they're working on resolving them, but this is not something that is competing against Flask and Django and Fast API yet. This is something that you would never use as of right now. You would not use in a production environment. You would not use this in a business. You would not use this on your website for your startup. This is something you can play around with. It may mature over time. It may get to this final public stage where it's production ready eventually. As of right now, it's in the public alpha, which is also why this video is more of a showcasing. This is more showcasing the features of Pinecone, showing you what it is about. It's not a crash course. I might do a crash course once it's production ready or at least more mature. As of right now, I just want to show you the concept of building web applications using only Python. This is what we're going to do today. And for that, we're going to install, first of all, Pinecone. So we're going to open up a command line. We're going to type pip install Pinecone. And once we have this installed, we're going to navigate to the directory that we're going to be coding in. In my case, this is the current directory here. And here I'm going to just say PC, which is a command line tool that is installed when you install Pinecone. So we're going to say PC init to create a new project in this directory. So this is going to just create the structure. In PyCharm here, you can now see that I have the structure. We have some web stuff, some assets, some config file, and then the current.py. Actually, let me just delete all of this because I need to create a directory first. Let's call this directory here my project, for example. And let's navigate into this directory and then do PC init, because the name of the project is going to be the name of the directory. So we're initializing the project inside of an existing directory. This is going to be the name of the project. So you can see the directory inside of this is also called my project, and the Python file here is also called my project. And this is the default project that we have here. So this is just Python code that generates everything. Now, the actual website in the end is going to run using JavaScript, using HTML, obviously, but we don't have to write any JavaScript code. We don't have to write any CSS code. We don't have to write any HTML. We're just writing Python code, and then all of this is being turned into HTML, into CSS, into JavaScript. So in order to run this now, what we need to do is we need to go into the command line again and to just say PC run. This is the default code. We didn't write anything yet. I'm just going to say PC run, and this is going to take some time. So I'm going to skip that part, but essentially what it's doing here is it's installing all the needed packages. So everything we need for the front end is being installed here. So it's going to basically fill up the node modules. Now, once everything is installed, the server is running on port 3000. So we can click on this link here, and this is the default application. Welcome to Pinecone. Get started by editing my project py, and then we can check out the docs. We can also inspect the page, and you're going to see it has HTML, it has JavaScript, it has CSS. Obviously, otherwise we wouldn't be able to see it here, but we don't have to write any of that code. We can just write Python code. And I'm not going to explain too much here the default example. What we're going to do is we're going to delete all of this and we're going to write our own code, and I'm going to explain what we're doing while writing the code. And what we want to do here is we want to have a simple example of just increasing and decreasing a number and displaying that number in real time dynamically without writing any JavaScript, by just using Python. So we're going to have a simple number, a simple label displaying a certain number, and then we're going to decrease and increase that number using buttons, and all of this will happen without a page reload, without post requests and stuff like that in the same tab, in the same window. And for that, we're going to say now import Pinecone as PC, and we're going to define a so-called state. We need to have a state This class that we're going to define is going to inherit from pc.state, from pinecone.state. And this, as the name says, represents the state of our application. So you can call this class whatever you want. You can call it state, my project state, XYZ state, call it whatever you want. I'm going to just call it state, and we're going to inherit from pc.state. And here we're now going to just define a simple variable. Count is going to be equal to 0, and we're going to have two functions, increment, which is going to say self.count plus equals 1. And then we're going to copy that. We're going to have another function, decrement, which is going to decrease the number by 1. So that is our basic state, and now we can build a UI around it. So we can say here that we want to have the endpoint index, so def index, which is going to be our default endpoint here. We're going to return here a certain layout. We want to return a UI, a user interface. And what kind of user interface we return is up to us. We can do that here with Pinecone. So I want to have three elements. I want to have a button, a label, and a button. So I want to have them horizontally stacked. So I'm going to use a horizontal stack, which is the function pc.hstack. Horizontal stack. And here I'm going to now add the UI elements. pc.button with a minus sign as the label. Then the color scheme is going to be red. Those are basically now the styling settings here. So we have the CSS type of styling here. I'm going to say border underscore radius is going to be 1em. And then we're going to provide the onClick event, which is going to be state.decrement. Like this. We're passing the function as an entity. We're not calling it. Then I'm also going to say PC heading like this. It's going to be state.count. So we're binding state.count to this heading here. And the font size is going to be 2em. And then finally, we can copy this button here. We can change this to plus. We can change the color to green. And we can change the function to increment. And that is basically our UI. Now, in order to get all of this running, what we need to do down here is we need to say app equals pc.app. The state that we pass is our state class. And then we're going to add the pages. We're going to add the index function here as a page. The path is going to be just slash. So the default path. You can also provide here a custom path if you want to. I'm just going to use the default root path. And then we're going to say app.compile. So I think that the changes are not dynamically, they're actually dynamically applied. There you go. We have the page. We don't even have to restart. That's it. So we have here the 0. I can decrease the number. I can increase the number. We don't need any JavaScript for it. Now, JavaScript is definitely running, but we don't need to write any JavaScript for it. We don't need to deal with React. We don't need to deal with Angular. If you want to keep it simple and you just want to have some basic functionality, all of this was written in Python. I can right click here, inspect. You can see that those are actual UI elements, button, H2 button, stuff like that. I don't know where JavaScript is exactly, but all of this was compiled by Pinecone. We didn't have to write any of this. So that's a very simple example. Let's add something else here. Let's work with PC variables. And for this, I mixed a couple of the examples that I saw in the repository here into one example, so I'm going to try to not mess up everything. But essentially, what I also want to show you is you can also change the colors, change the styling based on certain values, based on binding values. So we can say here, for example, the current color of something is going to be red. Then we have a color list that contains a couple of different colors. The first one being red, the default color. Then we have green, and then we have blue, and then we have orange, and then we have purple. You can fill it up if you want with other colors. And then we have so-called color index, which is going to be 0 by default. And what we want to do now is we want to say, we want to have another page. Let's call this page other. And what we want to do here is we want to just change the color of a text. So we can say, for example, here, return pc.vstack for vertical stack to see the difference here. What I want to do here is I want to have a button. And this time I'm going to say I want to have an opening angle bracket. The color should be gray. The radius can still be 1 EM. And on click, I want to trigger a function called state.backwards. Now we don't have that function yet, so let's just define it real quick. What we want to do here is we just want to rotate through the colors. So def backwards self dot color index plus equals 1. Actually backwards is minus equals 1. We always want to say modulo 5 so that we stay in the circle, we stay in the rotation, because you then have basically when you say modulo 5, whatever the value is, it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. You can never get out of that because you're always taking the remainder of the division by 5. So self dot color index modulo equals 5, and thus we're always in the index range and we're rotating. And then we're going to say that the current color is going to be equal to color dot, or actually color list. And then we pick here the color index, the current one. And all of these, of course, with a self before them. Otherwise, they're not going to be recognized. Now we can copy that. We can paste this. We can change this to forward. And we can change this to a plus. The rest stays the same. And that's basically it. We're going to have this button. We're going to have another button, which is going to be in the other direction, the closing bracket, and it's going to say forward. And in between, we're going to have a simple heading, which is going to say hello world. And the color, this is now the binding, is going to be state.color. So the color of this heading will always be this value here, which we change using backwards and forward. So then we also want to say here simple font size is going to be 2 EM. I'm going to add some commas in here. What's happening there? Something just fell apart to my left. And that's basically it. Now, all we need to do in order to add this page is we need to add it using the add page method here. So we're going to copy this. We're going to add the other page to /other, like this. All right, so that should actually already work. So let's go ahead and call this other. There you go, and we should be able to change the color here. As you can see, it also rotates, so that's also something that we can do. Now, for the rest of the video, I don't want to code with you because, as I mentioned, this is not a crash course where I show you how to do all the different things. It's just immature at this point, or too immature at this point to do an actual crash course or tutorial. So I want to show you some examples that I found on the GitHub examples page, and I want to show you how those work. They're not my code. This is from the actual developers of this library. One of them is the graph traversal. So I can just copy this. I can just paste this here. And hopefully it compiles immediately. It does not. Oh, there you go. It does. So that's a web app written entirely in Python. That's the code here. It's a bit more code, but it's all Python, right? So we have generate the graph. You have the state here with the walls and the colored graph and stuff like that. You can add a new graph. I didn't look into the code too much. I just want to show you here. That's the code that you need, roughly, from the size. Here you have all the styling. All of this is all it takes to produce what I'm going to show you here. This is a simple graph traversal. We can say here, generate graph, select an algorithm, breadth first search, run, and you can see it does the path finding and it finds the resource. That is a simple application in the web using JavaScript, using CSS, using HTML, written entirely in Python. Another thing here, and I didn't save what this actually does. I think it's a clock. This here is a clock, I think, written completely in Python. So when this reloads, we should be able to get an exception. What's the problem here? Let me just see if I copied the code correctly. What's the problem? There you go. There's no problem. So that's a simple clock. I can turn it on, it runs. I can turn it off, it stops. When I turn it on again, it runs in the correct time. I can select a time zone, London, Paris, Moscow, stuff like that. So that's also quite simple. This is the code for that. So you have a lot of UI elements. You can see here, you have a divider, you have different dividers, I think representing the individual pointers. And then you have here, what do you have? Circle, stacking some headings and stuff like that. So basically just formatting everything so that it looks like a clock, but all of this is styling. Border radius, border color, border width, background, transform function here, or transform parameter here. All these CSS parameters, and then you have a bunch of variables here. That's also something that I want to show you. Actually, I forgot to show you this, so let's just get back, if possible, to our code here. Is this our code? I think this is our code. One thing I want to show you here is we can also have a real-time text binding. So I can say here def my, or let's call this other2. I don't want to come up with a fancy name here. Let's return here a simple v-stack, a vertical stack, where we have a simple heading, PC heading. And the value of this is going to be state dot, and we're going to create a variable here as a function. We're going to call this def my text. And this is going to be a state, not a state, a variable, pc.var. And we're going to say here return self dot, and we need to define a text here. Text equals hello world by default. Self.text. So that is our function here, and we can now bind this function to this heading. So we can say state dot and then refer to the function here, which is my text. That's the heading, and then we can say PC input, so an input field, and on blur, this is an event, on blur we want to change the value of the text. So state.set underscore text. And we can also add a placeholder or not. So let's just add this page here to other2. Let's go back into the browser and go to other2. That is, I think, not the correct page, obviously. So we need to change it to the correct one. There you go. And now if I change something here, this also changes up there. So I have to leave the field, but then when I leave the field with my mouse and I click somewhere else, when I unfocus, so to say, it changes the text to this thing here above. And I can also take this and turn this into something else. So I can also manipulate the text that I have here. So I can say in this function here, don't return the text, return the upper version, the uppercase version of the text. And then we're going to see a different result. So if I reload now, you can see hello world, and when I type something, I can see the same text, but it's in uppercase. So I can also do some stuff in between here. That's just a short thing that I wanted to show you here. And last but not least, an example that's very simple from the repository, from the examples repository, a to-do list. So I can save this now here, and I can show you what this looks like. We have the simple to-do list here. I can add to-dos, and I can finish to-dos. And that is not a lot of code that we have here. This is just a simple state with some items. We can add an item, we can finish an item, we can render, we render here the to-do list with buttons, and we have the headings, the input, the button, and the list of the individual to-dos, and that's it. This is how you can build a simple to-do list app just using Python in the web. You don't have HTML, you don't have CSS, JavaScript, but it works. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and hope you learned something. If so, let me know by hitting a like button and leaving a comment in the comment section down below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell to not miss a single future video for free. Other than that, thank you much for watching. See you in the next video, and bye.